Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today I'm going to talk about a very small game, but one that I really love a lot. This is called Warrior Poets, and the best and briefest description of this game I can give you is that it is a one-shot RPG that does not require a game master, and the whole process of character creation and storytelling, scenario, all of that takes 2 or 3 hours for an average group of 4 to 5 people. So whole story start to finish. But here's the kicker: the combat system is resolved not by rolling dice, but by writing haikus. And if that all by itself doesn't get you excited about Warrior Poets, then this is not the game for you. But on the off chance, on what I assume is a very good chance that you are excited about a game where the combat system is writing haikus, let's talk about Warrior Poets. Okay? So, Warrior Poet is produced by, I don't know, let's start over. So, Warrior Poet starts with scenario creation. Like I said, you don't need a GM, but you can have one. And that person would be called the facilitator or the emperor. But you can take turns being the emperor as necessary if you want to. The same way, like playing apples to apples, everyone has a turn being the judge. So, what you're going to do, you're going to start by defining what your setting is. And they call this the Empire of the Moon, though you can really do any kind of setting that you want. It's very clearly inspired by, samurai movies, by Wu Xia movies, that kind of thing, where there are, people with not just martial arts, but supernatural martial arts, flying through the sky, summoning storms, all that kind of thing. So they have different ideas, and the game requires there to be 4 different courts or factions, um, one for each season of the year. And so it gives some ideas here. There's the elemental courts, or you can do clans, or you can do these different societies and things. Anyway, once you've decided what that setting will be and where everyone is, then everyone starts, before you do any character creation, you're going to do some world building. Okay? And what is the Empire of the Moon like? What are all those little courts and factions that I just skipped through? Doesn't matter, because nothing is known about them. You create them from whole cloth when you sit down to play. And this is actually a really simple, very fun process. It's a very narrative, very storytelling driven game. So you're going to start off with these 4 things, and each player is going to write down, for example, an influential and important person within the empire, a sacred or valuable place within the empire, and so on like that. You'll establish some important things, people, factions, bad guys, etc. And then, as a group, the facilitator or the emperor is going to say, okay, read each of these sentences, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. And then as a group, you're going to decide what that is. So the first one says, the neighboring antagonistic power is making preparations to invade us because reason, and we will come to catastrophic war come winter unless a solution is provided. Okay? So that just right there establishes your setting and your conflict for you. But it gives the players a chance as a group to say, well, which antagonistic power do we like? Every player in the game wrote one down. Now, tell us what you wrote down, and we as a group will pick one, and then we'll throw it in there. Okay? And you're going to do that with all of these things. So when you establish all of those, then you've got your setting. You know what your scenario is going to be about. Okay? Next is you create your character. And there are no actual stats for this, right? Because this is all very narrative. So you start off by just picking which faction you're going to be in, give yourself a name, give yourself a quick style and background. So for example, in their example, there's a character named Drifting Ember. It says, Drifting Ember was a great musician before she came to power. She is perpetually surrounded by incense smoke. That's all it has to be. And those kinds of things are actually going to matter to the game, much more so than any actual numbers would. So, you describe what you look like and what your robes are like and what your sword is like and pistols if you want to use pistols. Then you're going to establish some bonds. There's one other character you love, one other character you hate, and then, you kind of define what that is. Why do you love them? Why do you hate them? What other complications are there? And then you write down 2 desires, and they can be anything. They can be vengeance, they can be love, they can be whatever. And so you go through, and once you've written those things down, here's who I am, here's what I look like, here's, my little bit about my personality. I love this person because X, I hate this person because Y, and these are 2 things I want. That's your character sheet. Okay? Very simple, very focused on the story. Next up, you have the seasons. And there are 4 seasons. And in each season, each character gets to take an action. And again, there are no dice rolls required for this. Because the story is not about how well you can do the thing. Like if you say, well, I want to defeat the antagonist, first of all, that might be a really boring one if it just ends the story too quick. But you can say, I'm going to summon an army or a giant navy to attack them before they can reach our shores. Okay? And that's your action. And you just say that you're going to do it. And unless somebody opposes you, it happens. And then everyone's like, well, okay, you raised a giant navy and you are able to attack them before they reach the shores. That's your action for the season. So every player in the game is going to get, over the course of the game, 4 actions. Now, the wrinkle comes if somebody wants to do an action that you disagree with because your personal background, you hate them as a character, or your desire, you need to avenge your father and this person did something and so you have to go. If for whatever reason you decide you're going to oppose their action, that's when we get to the haikus, and that is dealt with as a duel. A duel is when you just 2 characters, the person who tried the action and the person who says, I will not stand for this, we're going to have a duel. And then you start by defining where the duel happens. And this might just be in the court. It might be leaping, through the tops of the trees like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It might be up on a snowy mountain peak. It might be on a bridge over a bottomless chasm. Imagine something really cool and really fascinating. And you are able to go back and forth and say, well, this is true. And this is true, and this is true. And at some point, somebody says, oh, also you can get help from other people. At some point you say, what is it? I begin to write. And as soon as someone says, I begin to write, then you write the first line of a haiku. And depending on how your group interprets this, you can do your haikus any way you want. Typically in America, we are taught that they are 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. That's not actually how they are in Japanese. And so different groups are going to interpret that in different ways. But as long as everyone's following the same rules, it doesn't matter a ton. So then you have written your first line of a haiku, and then you present them to each other. And then whoever is playing the role of the emperor in that situation, the apples to apples judge, says, oh, that is the best line. And so then that becomes the first line of the joint haiku. And that the player who created that, I think, gets an extra die. Everyone starts off with 2 dice, and you can gain extra dice by getting by winning the lines of haiku. So for example, the attacker writes, snow clouds blur horizons. The defender writes, swords borne by Hawkwing. The emperor believes that the attacker's line was better, and they win the round. So there you go. And then you'll do that again for the second round, and you'll do that again for the third round. And then at the end of it, you will have, boop, a completed haiku. And so in this case, um, snow clouds blur horizons, sword-cut flakes fill the open sky, bullets thunder down. And that's what you end up with. And then, depending on who won each different line, different players are going to have dice, at which point two things happen. This is the one time that there are dice in the game. You can first spend dice to make things true. And they have to, A, relate to the conflict in some way, and B, they can't void the need for the conflict. You can't just say, I'm going to state that I win the duel. Like, that's not how it works, okay? You are able to say something like, I state that during the duel, I cut off a braid of his hair. You could do something like that if you wanted. Anyway, everyone has their little pool of dice, just six-sided dice, and you roll them. I guess they could be any kind of dice, because it doesn't matter what numbers are rolled. What matters is how many matches you have. So if somebody rolls doubles and somebody else rolls triples of any number at all, the person who rolled triples wins. Or the person who rolled doubles beats the person who didn't roll any duplicates at all. And so that is how it works. And whoever wins gets to choose what's called a glory for themselves. And the glories can just be, I gain this incredible thing. We just fought on this bridge over a bottomless chasm, and I get a glory because I was able to leap all the way from one side to the other without using the bridge. Okay? Whatever you decide your glory is going to be, and you can get as Wu Xia about this as you want. And then in future duels, anytime a glory that you have earned in a previous duel shows up again, then that will give you an extra die to roll, which will make it more likely that you can win stuff. So that is how the game goes. And then at the end, after everyone has done an action in each season, then you get to winter. And you will know at that point what has happened, whether this overarching epic storyline has been resolved, how it has been resolved, and then the facilitator will ask each one, have you loved? Have you hated? Have you protected the Empire from threats? Have you achieved your desires? When songs are sung of you years from now, what will those songs be about? And everyone has a chance to do that. So in essence, what you're really doing with this game is just sitting around, telling a story, and writing some haiku. And then at the end of it, you will have written down all the haikus, and it's not actually in here. Whoever, the facilitator is going to save all those haikus and write them down, and then you will have what is essentially a poetry record of the story that you told together. I really love this. It hits all of those buttons for me that Fiasco does, for example. Here is a one-shot game in which we create the scenario and the characters together, and the storytelling doesn't matter, or does matter so much more than the dice. I love that kind of game. I also like this one because of the haiku aspect, because of the poetry writing aspect. I love writing poetry, I love reading poetry, and the idea that you have this kind of very artistic, laid-back, zen-ish focus on art rather than combat, or art as a stand-in for combat. I really love that. So this game hits all of my buttons. Every buttons I didn't even know I had, this game is hitting. And so it's really great. You can find this very cheap online. Check out the actual website. Just look up Warrior Poets RPG, or you can look up Drive-Thru RPG. Warrior Poets is there. And if you like movies like Hero or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, those kinds of things, then this is going to do it for you in some really incredible ways. So, hooray for Warrior Poet. Give it a shot and get a group of people together and write some haiku. Anyway, I'm Dan Wells, and you are awesome. Thanks for watching.